Welcome back to the channel and my LP build from thefretwire.com. I built a Thinline telecaster from Fretwire in previous videos. That turned out pretty great. I'll leave a link up there. So in this video, this is where the fun begins. Well, mostly, as I'm not a massive fan of soldering, but this is where it all comes together at least. And I found a great couple of videos online that helped me with various parts of the wiring, so I'll link those below for you guys. I do recommend also reading the documentation that the Fretwire provide, as it's a great start to the build. So, let's get into it. I've actually done this with all my guitars. I've used this copper tape that I got from Amazon. It's really good, and I don't know if shielding the cavities is going to help on an LP style, but I did read it on some forums, and to be honest, it can't really hurt. So I decided to give it some extra shielding in there by just adding the copper tape. I also had to watch some YouTube videos as well to figure out how to do the wiring on this guitar. The fretwire.com does give you an excellent wiring guide, and the pamphlets and the PDFs that you can download from the Fretwire are actually really good reads, so it's definitely worth reading those before you get started. This particular video I saw, they came up with a jig, so you actually do all of the wiring outside of the guitar, which does make things a lot easier. The grounding, or the ground wires that you put between the pots, are pretty straightforward. I just put a little bit of solder onto the top of the pots, and then of course you bend various legs back and make sure that those particular legs on those particular pots are grounded, and then you can just run the wiring all the way around the pots. Some people just use one continuous piece of wire, which seems like a good idea. I didn't have that, so I had to cut individual pieces of wire to go round and ground all of the pots together. The wiring diagram I used, or at least the wiring diagram I found on YouTube, was a 50s wiring diagram. I'll be absolutely honest, I don't know the difference between a 50s and a modern wiring diagram, and I don't know the difference that it's going to make, but I'll definitely leave the links below so that you guys can check it out as well if you're attempting to do this. The reason I used this particular video and this method of wiring is because it made the most sense to me. I could follow it really easily. This is where I wire the output jack. Now, if you were to zoom in on the video, you will notice that I wired the output jack round the wrong way. So, if you're going to do this, where I solder it on to that particular pin, don't solder it onto that one, solder it onto the other one. So I got that wrong, so just a little lesson learned there. So, full disclosure. The pickups that I'm going to put into the guitar are Epiphone pickups, and they were sent to me by a guy that follows the channel. Thanks, Brad. If you want to hear the original pickups, then you can always check out my Thinline telecaster build, where you can hear those pickups. They do sound amazing as well, but I just want to let you guys know. All in all, soldering isn't my most favourite thing to do because it does take a lot of thought. You have to keep looking at the diagram and making sure that all your wires are going into the right places, making sure that when you do the wiring that your hot and ground wires aren't touching any other hot and ground wires, So it is something that you really do need to concentrate on. Not my favourite thing, but I can do it, I can get it done, it just takes time. Next thing to do is install the switch, but I did find that the wire was too short from the fretwire.com. I'm assuming that that piece of wire that I had was the correct wire for the switch to go into the cavity. So that in mind, I decided to make my own wires up. I had some spare wire anyway from a previous build. The only issue here, of course, is that I have 2 red wires and 2 black wires. So when I feed them through and have a look at these 4 wires poking out of the cavity, I'm not going to be sure which wire's which coming from the switch. So all you do is just grab the end of one wire from the cavity like that, one wire from the switch cavity, and just pull them to identify which wire's which. In an ideal world you'd have 4 different colour wires, but I didn't. This is where my ideas for this particular build come into play. I decided instead of the cream rings and instead of the cream poker chip and the cream switch tip that I would swap everything out to white. I did go through various different styles of knobs with a white top and a gold surround, the gold knobs, but I eventually decided that white knobs will look pretty unique on this guitar. So I changed everything out to white, and that's when I also sprayed the back plates white as well. I just got myself a white spray. I already had some clear lacquer, so I clear lacquered them as well, just to give it a little bit of a unique look. One important thing here as well is don't forget about the bridge ground wire. That goes through the cavity where the pots are and comes out a little hole by the bridge, so just make sure you've got a really good connection there. Probably should use a rubber mallet to do this, but I decided just to use a bit of cardboard and the hammer that I already had so that I wouldn't mark the top of the tailpiece pins and the bridge pins as well. And when you tap those down you can hear a clunk, which gives you a good indication that you've gone far enough. Just make sure that you keep them straight as you hammer them down, and don't hammer them too hard, just keep going until you hear that clunk and until they're fully seated. For now I'll put the gold knobs on, just want to test the guitar out, make sure everything's okay, because the white knobs hadn't turned up yet. These were some of the headstock logo designs that I came up with, because I wanted Derek Paul model, because on Gibson's it says Les Paul model, so I just wanted a little cheeky design on there, and I decided to put my logo at the top of the headstock as well, because that was circular and it sort of matched the curves of the headstock perfectly, so I thought that was a good idea. Headstock decal was nice and easy. I used this decal paper from Amazon. It's water transfer paper. So I put a couple of coats of lacquer onto the headstock, then the decal, and then another couple of coats of lacquer. And what that does is it hides the outline of the decal on the headstock and gives you a really nice smooth finish and a really professional look on your decal on that headstock. Enjoyed this build, frustrating at times, but that's part of the learning process. And the thing I feared the most was the setup at the end. But as it turns out, it was really simple. No different really to an S or T style guitar. And once I'd finished the build and played it through my amp for the first time, I had a massive smile on my face. It plays and sounds absolutely fantastic. I was over the moon with it. My first LP style guitar. I think I might just come to love it. also worth noting that the fretwire.com also has parts at really good prices, as well as bodies and necks, and a gallery of customer builds, so it's well worth checking out. I want to thank the guys again at the fretwire.com for supplying the kit for the build. I really appreciate that. But what did you think? Let me know below, and links to all the kit, all the parts, stains and the gear I used are below also for your info. And I'll see you guys in the comments. Cheers!